Thank you, Ralph and Janelle and Abby. That was beautiful. It is all about Jesus, isn't it? That's right. I think sometimes we make things more complicated. And I believe that when we reach the place where we should as a church, we will be known for our love for Jesus and for other people. Certainly there are many things important about the truths of the Bible. Sabbath, state of the dead, three angels' message, sanctuary, definitely important. But without Jesus, what does it mean, right? Without His great love for us and His sacrifice on our behalf, it really doesn't mean anything, right? So I'd like to talk with Him one more time. Please bow your heads with me. It is really all about you, Lord Jesus. And I pray that as we talk, whether it be a health talk or whether it be a sermon or even just casual conversation, that you would be the focus, that you would be the center of our lives, Lord, that you would be the reason, the motive, and the goal for everything that we say, do, or think. I pray now that you would take full possession of my mind, my heart, and my lips, even the expression on my face, Lord, that it would be a blessing to my brothers and sisters and encourage them to live their lives just like you. In your name we pray. Amen. There are very few words that cause more fear than cancer. In fact, have you ever noticed that the doctors, we don't even like to say it, right? We'll say, well, Mr. Jones, you have a growth. Well, Mrs. Smith, there is an abnormality on the CAT scan, right? We never even want to say it. And there is a reason why we as physicians are afraid of saying it. It's because it will go like this. Well, Mr. Johnson, the pathology report came back and it looks like it's cancer. You won't hear anything else after that. After we're done talking, you'll say, am I gonna die? Right? Because cancer is synonymous with death, right? But not instant death. Not the type of death that my grandfather achieved. He lived in my home for the last years of his life. On the night of his death, he was very tender and kind to my grandmother. He had no dementia, no disabilities, no chronic pain, no cane, no walker, no nothing. He went to his easy chair. The last thing he read was the Bible. He went to bed and he died in his sleep. But how do you die when you have cancer? Is it instant, usually? No. See, most people don't even fear the death aspect of it. What do they fear? The suffering, right? They fear the chemo. They fear the radiation. They fear the surgery, the mutilation of their bodies, the loss of their manhood or womanhood. They fear the suffering. Hopefully, by the end of this lecture, I will help to dispel some of the fear. Because I believe if you understand what cancer is, you will have a better way to defeat it. So let's talk about if you have cancer. Now, many of you may think that there's nothing you can do to prevent cancer, but I want you to know that there is. There are 7 signs and symptoms published by the American Cancer Society that you yourself can discover by checking, by just being very aware of how you're feeling. And does anyone know what those signs or symptoms are? Anyone guess?
The swimming.
A what? A lump or swelling. That is correct. Thank you, doctor. Amen. Praise God. You got the first one. You should get a prize. So anyone else? There's 6 more. Yes?
Abnormal growth.
Abnormal growth. Yes. So a lump or swelling or an abnormal growth. Absolutely. You know, any kind of mass that's getting bigger, that's not normal, right? Anything else? Well, weight loss, yes, but it didn't make the top 7 because it's non-specific. There's other things that cause weight loss. In fact, some of us should probably experience that symptom in this room, right? Anything else? Yes, that's right. A discharge, like a discharge that is abnormal, a bloody or pussy discharge or something like that, absolutely true. So blood or kind of abnormal discharge, abnormal bleeding discharge, that's correct. Anything else?
Change in bowel habits.
Yes, very important. Change in bowel or bladder habits. So in other words, if someone is always regular and then all of a sudden they're constipated for no reason, that's not normal. Or if you're regular and then you just suddenly have diarrhea, that's not normal either. So anything else? You guys are doing great. Most audiences don't do this well, actually. Any other signs or symptoms that might be an indicator that you have cancer? Well, fatigue, yes, that's true, but that's, again, non-specific. That can occur in a lot of other things. That can occur when you end up talking too late or go out to the mall too late or something like that, right? So, anything else?
Loss of weight.
Weight loss, yes, but again, that's non-specific. That's in a lot of other things. So, change of behavior, yeah, that's true, but that's can happen in a lot of psychiatric conditions too. Yes? Pain, yes, pain does occur, but pain is very non-specific, and it can occur in a lot of other things. Appetite, yes, your appetite can go down in cancer, but that's usually late. Loss of vision, yes, but that can occur with a lot of other things. Diabetes, right? Anything else? Nausea, pretty general symptom, yeah. Have you ever had somebody who comes to you and they think they have a cold, right? They might have a cough like that. I've had patients come to me and I will see them for something else, and I'll say, hey, how long have you had that cough? What's going on? Oh, I just have a cold. I said, no, but how long have you had the cough? 6 months. You think it's a cold? For 6 months? Yeah, so a nagging cough or a hoarseness can be a sign of cancer. Some of the other signs are painful swallowing, difficulty swallowing, or an upset stomach sort of feeling along with it. You also have the cough or hoarseness that I mentioned. We have the lump or thickening, as was mentioned by our brother. We also have the change in bowel or bladder habits, as was mentioned. We also have the bleeding or discharge that was mentioned. And there's one thing that we haven't mentioned yet that I'll wait on. Have you ever noticed sometimes people will get an injury and it doesn't heal? It just stays there. So a sore that does not heal can be a sign of cancer. In fact, sometimes cancer can come out of a scar, a chronic sort of wound. And lastly, a change in a wart or a mole. I'm going to make you junior dermatologists now. Are you ready? It's as easy as A, B, C, D. Everyone knows the alphabet, right? So you can become a junior dermatologist. A is asymmetry. God designed us to be the same on one side and the other. Now, not completely, right? There's a little bit of asymmetry that can be normal, but in general, we should be the same side on one side as the other. Things that are malignant or cancerous are not symmetrical. Does that make sense? B is border. The body has smooth borders. If you have an irregular or jagged border, that's usually cancer. C is color. generally a wart or mole should be one color. If it's 2 or 3 or 4 different colors, it's usually malignant or cancer. Diameter, it should be small. And the cutoff is 6 millimeters. So if you have something that's greater than 6 millimeters, that needs to be assessed by a dermatologist and possibly biopsied. And the way you can remember that is, remember those erasers you used to use like in pencils? I know we all use iPads now, right? But the back of a pencil eraser is 6 millimeters. So that's how you can remember the size. So let's just take a look at what is the worst skin cancer. What's the worst form of skin cancer? This skin cancer spreads to other organs. That's why everyone is afraid of it. Have you heard of melanoma? Yes. Does anyone know in overall what is the most common kind of cancer? This is a trick question.
Colon cancer.
Nope, but that's good. That's a good guess. What's the most common type of cancer? Nope. Nope. That's a good question. I told you a trick question. What's the most common type of cancer? I didn't say deadly. I said most common. Lung cancer is the most deadly. Nope. Skin cancer. Who said skin cancer? Very good. That's right. Skin cancer is the most common cancer, but it is not very fatal. Does that make sense? It occurs all the time. In fact, when you go and you see a doctor with liquid nitrogen, and he goes, someone is going, many times he's just killing a cancer. Did you know that? Or a precancerous lesion. So skin cancer is usually just locally invasive, so you can either freeze it off, cut it out, or something like that, unless it's melanoma, because that can metastasize. So this is normal symmetry. This is benign, so you see how it's the same on one side as the other. That's normal. This is not normal. Can you see this? It's kind of flat on one side, and it's got almost like an evil head on the other side. That's melanoma. That's cancer. This has a nice smooth border. This is benign. This is actually a strawberry hemangioma. You just don't want to pick at it because it'll bleed like stink, but it is benign. It is not cancer. It's got a smooth border. Now this, wow, it's kind of like almost like a raspberry. Raspberries are good to eat, but not on you. That's melanoma. We have this is one color. It's kind of tan. This is a verruca. This is a wart, common wart, benign. This is many colors. He's kind of black over here, red, tan. That is melanoma. Bad news. This is a just normal sized benign lesion, and I don't know if you can tell, but this is someone's mouth right here. That is way too big. That is melanoma. That is cancer. So, how do you prevent skin cancer? What do people traditionally say? What's the traditional advice? Yeah, avoid the sun, right? Isn't that what people say? Stay out of the sun. Did you know that we don't recommend that anymore? This is totally different now. In fact, they did a study on people who avoid being exposed to sun versus those who go out in the sun. And the people who intentionally avoid sun, even with the umbrellas, yes, I know it's you, confess. If you're trying to avoid the sun, you will have 200% more cancer risk. Yes, it's true. Now, I'm not saying you should get sunburned, okay? So be careful, take me in context. Don't get burned, but get rid of the umbrellas, please. It's okay to be a little tan. Everyone comes to me, hey, why are you so dark? I know you guys like light skin, but I want you to know that vitamin D has been shown to be the most powerful anti-cancer agent in like the last decade. It's pretty amazing now. Now obviously it's been there before, but the literature has just recently come out with some studies. And a very interesting study was done in Hawaii. It's called the surfer study, the skateboarder study. I mean, obviously that's not the actual name of it, but if you want to look it up on the internet, you can do it that way. And what they found is that these skateboarders and surfers, even though they were outside for like 8 hours a day, they measured their vitamin D levels, and like almost all of them were vitamin D deficient. Yeah, how is that possible? The reason why is, what do you do after you spend all day surfing? What do you do right afterwards? You what? Yes, you take a shower. And you know where all the vitamin D goes? Down the drain. Because the way it works is, when sunlight strikes your skin, it takes a very interesting chemical reaction, and it turns a molecule that's in your skin layer, very superficially, into a precursor of vitamin D. Now, it has to go to the liver, it has to go to the kidneys, it has to go through all these transformations, and you don't need to know that. Unless you're going to be a physician, you probably do need to know it then. But basically what happens is, when it strikes your skin, for that vitamin D to completely all diffuse into your capillaries and then into your circulation takes 4 days. Now, I'm not saying don't take a shower for 4 days, especially here at the retreat, because you don't want to offend your neighbor, right? But what I am saying is, at least give it some time. Does that make sense? How much time? I heard that. Enough to get vitamin D, but not enough to smell. No. What I would say is this. After about 2 days, you get most of it into your circulation. But here's what I'd recommend instead. Vitamin D, as we talked about, is a fat-soluble vitamin, right? The fat-soluble vitamins, who knows what they are? A. What else? D. E. That's right. And K. Wow. Who knew? You guys knew all those? That's really good. Very good. So the fat-soluble vitamins do not dissolve in water. They dissolve in fat. Does that make sense? So when you go into the shower, what is like the worst thing for you to do? Soap up, right? Because you are dissolving the vitamin D into the soap, right? Now, I'm not saying never use soap either, okay? So don't take me out of context. But what I tell people is, do not soap up the sun-exposed areas. Does that make sense? Because the vitamin D is formed on the areas of skin that are exposed. Does that make sense? So, is your armpit exposed, right? Usually not, right? Most people don't walk around like this, right? Is your groin exposed? Probably not either, right? So you can soap up your armpits and your groin and stuff like that, because that's generally not exposed. Does that make sense? But don't soap up the exposed areas until they've had at least 48 hours after the exposure. Now, there's a very interesting thought process with vitamin D. People have said, well, I've got a normal vitamin D level. But what is normal? Have you thought about that? What really is normal? Well, normal, if you look at how we calculate normals in medicine, what we do is we take a large population of asymptomatic individuals, test their levels, and then go out 2 standard deviations, and we call that normal. But that's really voodoo, honestly. That's not the way it should be determined. How do you know that the person who has no symptoms is really healthful? Because just because you have no symptoms doesn't mean that you're not getting problems. As Pastor and I have talked, just because you don't have any apparent symptoms doesn't mean you're not forming buildup, right? That needs to be taken care of. So what I would propose is how you determine not normal, but how do you determine optimal, right? Because if you just want to be normal, right, what is the normal cause of death in the first world? And actually, even in the third world now. Does anyone know? What's the most common cause of death? Heart attack. That's right. That's a trick question. This is the cancer lecture, but so you got it. That was very, very good. So if you want to be normal, then you will die the normal death, right? I don't want to die of a heart attack, right? Can you imagine if people just wanted to be normal or average? Your kid comes home and says, Mommy, I got a C. I'm average. How many parents would be happy with a C? I wouldn't be happy with a C, right? You want your kid to get an A, right? Absolutely. So you don't want to be normal. You don't want to be average. You want to be optimal, right? You want to be enjoying excellent health. So what I would propose is you look at the body's physiology. And vitamin D has been going under a lot of scrutiny. If they've been looking at it and saying, you know, maybe we should change the daily recommended amount. Does anyone know what the daily recommended amount for vitamin D is? 400. It used to be 400, actually. So it used to be 400 until just recently, and they actually changed it. Did you know that? They changed it to 800. Some people even say, what? 1,000. Did you know that? And some people are starting to go higher, but this is generally where most associations are at right now, about 1,000. Now, I'm going to share something with you that's going to blow your mind. If you look at the body's design and physiology, that should give you a better idea on what is normal and what is optimal. There's a very interesting website that's done by Norway, and you can calculate exactly how much vitamin D your body will produce by exposing your face and your arms, and there's all these little things you can plug in. It plugs in longitude, latitude, time of day, cloudy, sunny, if you're white, if you're Asian, if you're tan, if you're Middle Eastern, if you're black, everything. You can calculate everything in, because if you are white, right, you have greater chance to burn, but did you know they can absorb vitamin D better? Like myself and our brother right here, we are not going to absorb vitamin D as well because we are more pigmented. Does that make sense? You won't burn as much, but the disadvantage is you've got to be out in the sun more to get vitamin D. So I'm going to give you an idea. Let's say you were here. Okay, where we are is Singapore, Batam area, right? Let's say you exposed yourself during the prime time to get vitamin D, which is 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Some people say, oh, but that's the time you burn. But did you know the same spectrum of light gives you the vitamin D that can also cause the burning? So if you think about it, and you exposed yourself completely, like totally, like in your birthday suit, how many international units of vitamin D would you produce in an hour? What do you guys think?
Does it depend on which time of the day?
It does. I'll just say in the middle of the day. Middle of the day. Middle of the day, totally exposed. Someone guess. This is the total daily recommended amount. And I'm just saying 1 hour out in the sun. That's all I'm saying. Just 1 hour. What can your body produce in 1 hour? 400? Anyone else? 1,000? 200? Anyone else? Try 25,000 international units. Your body can crank out a massive amount of vitamin D. If you are fully exposed and it's the right time of day, it can produce gigantic amounts of vitamin D. So do you really think that this is all you need for the whole day? If your body can produce 25,000, almost 100 times that in an hour. Does that make sense that maybe this is not wise? Maybe this isn't even wise. Maybe this isn't even wise. There's some places that are starting to go to 2,000, but not many. But I'm telling you right now that vitamin D is not even a vitamin. When they look at it now, it's actually more like a hormone, like growth hormone or testosterone or estrogen. It is that powerful for your health. And let me tell you, it's free. It's there for the taking. Just don't wash it off, right? It's not just cancer prevention anymore. It's for heart disease, it's for all kinds of diseases. In fact, there was a Chinese study that looked at normal vitamin D levels that were low or high. And the people who had low normal vitamin D levels were 300% more likely to die of pneumonia than people who had high normal if you were admitted to the hospital. So even within normal, there's differences. So if you check your vitamin D level, make sure you're not on the low end of normal. Make sure you're on the high end of normal. If I were to tell you that I was going to give you a curse, would you like that? Who would want the curse? No one, right? But I want you to know that it depends on who's giving you the curse. Did you know that? What if it was God giving you the curse? Well, that'd be even the worst, right? Well, take a look for a moment at God's curse. Genesis chapter 3, verses 17 through 19. Somebody read that for me. Genesis chapter 3, verses 17 through 19. Read it loud. Go ahead. Genesis chapter 3, 17 through 19.
And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree, of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake.
Hold on. Cursed is what?
The ground for thy sake.
Why was it cursed?
Because it is.
Cursed is the ground. Why? For
thy sake.
interesting. So why did God curse the ground? For our sake. Now, interesting. What is God going to require at this point? Because the ground is cursed, what's going to happen next? Go ahead.
In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life.
Keep going.
Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field.
Okay, keep going.
In the sweat of thy face.
Wait, in the what?
Sweat.
Okay, keep going.
In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread.
Okay, good. So what two things did God add in that passage by the curse? Sweat. So sweat from what? From exercise. He didn't add exercise because before that, man was there to dress and keep the garden, right? He added vigorous exercise, right? Because if you're sweating, is it hard or is it easy? It's hard, right? He added vigorous exercise, and what else did he add to man's diet? What's the herb? What's another word for herb? Vegetables, exactly. So God added vigorous physical exercise, and he added vegetables. Any guesses is if you look in the scientific medical literature, what two components of lifestyle combat cancer more than anything else?
Fiber.
Vegetables and vigorous exercise. Do you really think that's a curse?
Blessing.
It is a blessing. Work is a blessing for man. Vigorous exercise is one of the greatest things to detox your body. Because when you're sweating, what's happening? You're getting rid of the impurities. And if you doubt it, I have a challenge for you. If you go to a friend who is a smoker, give them a day of spa for free. And say, here's a nice container of water. Take it into the Russian steam bath or the sauna and keep them drinking and drinking, but wrap them up in a white, pure sheet. And leave them in there for about an hour and let them sweat. When you take the sheet off, do you know what you will find?
Yellow things.
Yellow. They will have detoxed what out? The nicotine. Did you know that? They will actually sweat it out. That's a way to quit smoking also, by the way. But we'll come to that later. Now, let's get into detecting cancer. Typically, people think about many things for cancer. There might be labs, abnormal lab liver enzymes, elevated white blood cell, low white blood cells. Even in the urine, you could actually see some malignant cells for bladder cancer or kidney cancer, bleeding also if you don't have an infection. One time, in fact, I had one of my nurses come to me, and she was playing a joke on me, but I didn't laugh. She said, ha 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 ha, I accidentally got a urine pregnancy test on the man in room 8, but it's positive. I said, I don't think that's funny. She's like, why? I said, he has cancer. She's like, what? And he ended up having a germ cell tumor because it was producing the beta HCG, which flags for the pregnancy test. But that's not typically the way we detect cancer. Typically, it's with some form of imaging. X-ray, CT are okay, MRI okay. PET scan is usually what they use. But I'm going to share with you that there is something that can detect and cure cancer when it is only one cell big. And I'll give you a hint. It's not monoclonal antibodies or something like that. Anyone know what it is? It can find cancer and eradicate it when it's only one cell big. Yes, it's the immune system. That's right. The immune system, right now, even as we speak, is destroying cancer cells in everyone's body. Did you know that? You are forming cancer cells all the time. What holds cancer at bay is the immune system. What keeps you alive every day is your immune system. Now, we mentioned what the #1 cause of death was. What was it? Heart attack or heart disease. But did you know that heart disease is actually going down in the first world and cancer is going up? And a lot of people wonder why. And I'll show you why. It's very simple. Who can tell me what cholesterol is? Raise your hand. Who knows what cholesterol is? Yeah, sure. Who knows what LDL and HDL refer to? Raise your hands. Yes, wonderful. Who knows what saturated fat is? Raise your hand. Okay, see, everybody pretty much knows those things. Who can name the 4 risk factors for heart disease? Can anyone name the 4 big risk factors for heart disease? Smoking, #1, yes, and? Yes, high blood pressure. High cholesterol, I heard that. What else? What's the last one? Diabetes, very good. So diabetes, smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Did you notice how easy you did that and how hard it was for you to do the cancer one? Did you notice that? Now the reason why that is because there's tremendous amounts of education that have gone into heart disease because it's the #1 killer. In fact, do you know why margarine was invented? Anyone know why? It was created to replace something. Butter, right? Because butter is pure saturated fat, right? Which is a huge risk factor for heart disease. Now, the problem with margarine, though, is you've got cis to trans issues. Do you know what trans fatty acids are? Really bad for you. But that's a different lecture. Anyone know how to go to the front of the line in the emergency department? Well, all you have to do is complain of one thing. I have chest pain. Get an IV in, get an EKG, draw labs, give her an aspirin, bring her back to the doctor. Doctor, I'm so glad they brought me back here. I said, well, tell me about the chest pain. Well, chest pain's okay, but can you look at this little rash down here? I just want you to take a little. Naughty, right? Some people do that, though. They cheat. So don't cheat. But the reason why you go to the head of the line is why? Because we're worried that you might be having a heart attack, right? Okay, now we're going to talk about the top 3 deadliest cancers. What is the deadliest cancer? Has the most deaths every year? Anyone know? Lung cancer, that's correct. Now, everybody knows what the risk factor is. What's the risk factor for lung cancer? Smoking, thank you. It's not asbestosis, but that is a risk factor. It's not the barbecue, it's smoking. That is the #1 risk. And it increases your risk by 7 times over baseline. However, it's not just a danger to the person who smokes. Did you know that? In California, they passed a law because they found that the bartenders and the waitresses were all getting lung cancer, emphysema, heart disease, and they're like, but I don't smoke, I don't understand. So why did they all get lung cancer? Secondhand smoke, that's right. In fact, if you have 350,000 deaths from lung cancer every year, did you know that 50,000 will be from secondhand smoke? It's about 7 times less, so that makes sense because the risk factor is 7 times. Now, does anyone remember where they were on September 11th? Does anyone remember where they were? A very momentous day, right? We had those 2 jumbo jets crash, and you know, some people will say that was just all rigged and stuff, and you know, I'm not going to debate that issue, but let's just say it was real, right? You had 10,000 people die in one day. But did you know that from cigarettes, 3 million people die per year? And that is just like having 9/11 every day of the year. But why doesn't this make the news? Because it's not glamorous, it's not exciting to see someone smoking out of their tracheostomy, right? You know, it's terrible. It's morbid, it's creepy, it's gross. But aren't those people just as valuable as the people who died in the Twin Towers? Sure they are. Jesus died for them too, right? Any other cancers caused by cigarettes besides lung cancer? Does anyone know?
Stomach cancer.
Yes. Anyone else? Yes. Anyone else? Yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. It causes like all of them. A better question is like, what does it not cause, right? So think about this. Most people say, hey, you should not criticize me because I can do whatever I want as long as it doesn't what? Hurt others. Did you know that everything you do affects other people? I don't care what it is. Anything you do affects other people, good or bad. And I want you to know that if you won't quit for yourself, you can quit for other people. In fact, does anyone know what the #1 cause of pediatric asthma is? It's actually smoking. Well, wait a minute, kids don't smoke. Secondhand smoke. I had a family come in one day and they said it's the barbecue. I said, oh, it's not the barbecue. It's because every adult in this child's life smokes. And people say, oh, no, 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 no. I smoke outside. Right? Have you heard that? But did you know it comes in on your clothes? And then some people say, oh, I changed my clothes. And did you know what? It comes out the pores of your skin. Did you know that? So even if you change, even if you go outside, you're still exposing people to the poisonous and irritating effects of tobacco. So if you don't quit for yourself, quit for others. In fact, if you have a parent that smokes in a closed room with an infant, for every pack of cigarettes that that parent smokes, it's like the child smoked 9 cigarettes. And that's because its body is much, much smaller. So can you imagine having your child smoke half a pack of cigarettes a day? That's evil, right? Yeah, obviously if you're younger, it's harder to quit. I knew a guy who said he had been smoking for 60 years. I said, wait a minute, sir, but you're 66 on the chart. He's like, that's right, I started when I was 6. Who gave him the first cigarette? His parents, unfortunately. That's right. So it's not the barbecue, right? Medicine is not the cure for asthma. You have to get rid of the cause, which is typically cigarettes. But I don't think you should criticize your friends who smoke. You should help them quit. Does anyone know what the most popular method of quitting smoking is? Who knows this? Nope. It's cold turkey, veggie turkey, of course, right? Method is what? Cold turkey. But the most successful method, does anyone know what the most successful method is? What do you think? It's not nicotine replacement, it's not Zyban, it's not the electric cigarettes, it's not any of that stuff. The most successful method to date is if you're having an active heart attack and either the cardiologist or ER doc says, you must stop smoking or you will die. When the threat of death faces people, that's pretty serious. But you know what? It doesn't always last. Once the person recovers from their heart attack, they sometimes go back to smoking. Now, what people say typically when they go back into smoking is what? What's the most common cause to start up smoking again? What do you think? Stress, that's right. People are stressed. Or they were around somebody who was smoking. Someone says, hey, do you want one? Yes, right? So here's a very good verse to give to your friends. Romans 13:14 gives you this key to victory. Put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make what? No provision for the flesh to fulfill its lust. So if you know you want to quit smoking, don't keep a pack of cigarettes in your top drawer. Don't be around people who smoke. Get rid of your favorite smoking chair. Or some people will typically say, well, Doc, I get up in the morning and I have my cup of what? Coffee, and then I want a... So then you should quit what? The coffee, right? Because that's a trigger for the smoking. And let me tell you, if you are persevering, you will overcome the cigarette habit. And any habit. God can give you the victory. Does anyone know who Dr. Burkitt was? Have you ever heard of Burkitt's lymphoma? Right? He was a physician that studied cancers, but he didn't just study lymphoma. He studied a cancer in Africa versus England. And he found that the Africans actually never got this form of cancer, but the English always got this form of cancer. And he finally figured out what the component was that was the risk factor for cancer. And in fact, we've mentioned it already. But what the interesting thing was, is that this component was in the diet. And the more amazing thing was, is that this component is not even absorbed. Does anyone know what he was studying? Fiber! That's right! Very true, Jasper. Fiber. So what cancer is related to fiber consumption? Colon cancer. That's absolutely right. But how is it possible that something you don't even absorb can be useful? Doesn't that seem funny? That seems kind of strange, doesn't it? In fact, they have found that colon cancer, it's not merely just the fiber. A lot of it's the meat. The meat protein is really, really the issue. But the key is that it's the meat protein in contact with the colon wall. They've also found that if you have high levels of bile salts, if they are in contact with the colon wall for long periods of time, it creates cancer, or it's carcinogenic, or carcinogenesis, you can call it whatever you want. But the bottom line is that when you have fiber, you move things along quicker. Does that make sense? In fact, we talk about transit time. Does anyone know what transit time refers to? It is the time from when you eat the food to when you see it again, right? And you know how you can calculate your own transit time for free? Go out and buy some beets. Did you know that? Yeah, beets. Do you like beets? Beet juice, things like that, right? Do you guys eat beets?
Oh yeah, sugar beet.
Beets, yeah, they're purple. They're very, very purple. So when you eat it, is that what it's called?
We use passion fruit.
Okay, you can use passion fruit. So anyway, when you eat the beets, you're going to see the purple pigment in your stool, and that is the transit time. Now, ideally, we would like to have a bowel movement every day. But did you know the Medical Association says it's normal to have a bowel movement every other day?
No.
Yes, they say it. But my question to that is I challenge it. I say, wait a minute, how many meals do you eat a day? 3? So wait a minute, where did the other 5 meals go? That's what I ask my colleagues. They say, oh, it's okay every other day. I'm like, but where's the other 5 meals? Kind of stuck somewhere maybe.
Become residue feces.
Exactly. So when you look at fiber, there are two types of fiber. Does anyone know what the two types of fiber are? Soluble and insoluble. That's right. And that's very simple. It means one dissolves in water and one doesn't. That's it. They're both beneficial. The insoluble fiber is the fiber found in most grains. I don't know if any of you heard of Metamucil, but that's just like psyllium husk. It's just insoluble fiber. And that allows your transit time to be shorter. So it sweeps things along. Now, you don't want a transit time super short. If your transit time is like 6 hours or 12 hours, you might have diarrhea. You might have a problem with that too. But this will help the feces to move along. It will keep the bile salts from staying there. It will keep the carcinogenic things from being in contact with your wall for a long time. Now, the soluble fiber is also useful. Does anyone know what the soluble fiber does? You'll like this one for sure. The soluble fiber actually binds bile salts and it carries them out the body. Isn't that interesting? So when you eat a lot of soluble fiber, it will bind the bile salts and it leaves. And did you know what the main component of bile salts is? Cholesterol. Have you ever seen the box of Cheerios in the grocery store? Cheerios lowers cholesterol. But did you know Cheerios don't lower cholesterol? It's, bless you, it's oats that lower cholesterol. And do you know why oats lower cholesterol? Because oats are half and half. They are half insoluble fiber and half soluble fiber. That's how oats work to lower cholesterol, is that they bind with the soluble fiber and they pull the bile salts out. Now, if you don't have soluble fiber, do you know what happens to the bile salts? They are reabsorbed. That's right. They are reabsorbed, and that is not what you want. You want to get rid of the bile salts. You don't want them to just back up and reabsorb over and over again, congesting your poor little gallbladder and liver, right? So fiber is very important for various reasons. You need both. And what I would like to share with you is a personal testimony of when I was a teenager. I love to go camping. Anyone like to go camping? All right, I love to go camping. But when you have no money, right, and you're a poor student, you can't get many things to bring to eat for camping. But did you know we would always get cheap, big box of certain things, and each packet was like 10 cents, 20 cents. What am I buying? Ramen, right? Ramen. And what is ramen?
Instant noodles.
Instant noodles. What's it made of?
Saturated fat.
It's saturated fat, yes. What else? Flour. But what kind of flour? White flour, right? And what else do you eat when you go camping, right? You cook what? Hot dogs, hamburgers, right? And what do you wrap around the hot dogs and hamburgers? Bread. But what kind of bread usually? White bread, right? You drink soda, right? Marshmallows. That's what typically people eat. This was before I was Adventist. Now you tell me, how much fiber is in a hot dog? 0. How much fiber is in a hamburger? 0. How much fiber in soda? 0. How much fiber in white noodles, white bread, white buns? Not 0, but very low, right? Did you know that every summer that I went camping, I would not go to the bathroom for a week? Yes, even though I was a young man, I was drinking plenty of water, we were doing lots of hiking. Now, why do you suppose I didn't have a bowel movement for a week? No fiber, right? Camping, anyone? So let's talk about the power of fiber. Fiber does not just move things along, but did you know that fiber in and of itself is antioxidant? It's anti-cancer just by itself. Very powerful. How do you suppose fiber helps you to lose weight? What do you think? How many calories per gram does fiber have? 0. That's right, because it's not absorbed, right? It fills you up with no calories. Has anyone ever heard of the full plate diet? full plate diet, it's very simple. It only requires, oh, thank you. It only requires 40 grams of fiber a day. That's the only rule to the full plate diet. That's it. 40 grams of fiber. That's the only rule. But I can tell you, if you eat 40 grams of fiber a day, will you lose weight? Absolutely you will. Absolutely you will. Also, fiber is good for what's called the glycemic index. Does anyone know what that refers to? Yes, sugar, that's right. That's important for diabetics. So when you look at 3 different things, we're going to talk about an apple, we're going to talk about apple sauce, and apple juice. Okay? 100 calories. And here's the apple. Here's the blood sugar level. This is blood sugar. And this is time. Okay? So when you eat the apple, your blood sugar rises and then it falls. Right? Now, what do you suppose happens if you take the same 100 calories, but you turn it into applesauce? Do you think there's any difference? It rises actually a little bit faster, and then it falls. What if you take the same 100 calories and turn it into juice? What do you suppose that looks like? Yes, that's right. I saw the guy in the back there. Good job. So it's going to like go even faster, and then it's going to come down. Now, it's the same 100 calories. Why do you suppose that your blood sugar levels are so different? What is the difference between the applesauce, and the apple juice? What's the difference? Just fiber. That's it. That's the only difference. And fiber actually slows the body's absorption of glucose. That is why if you come to someone who's a diabetic and you say, "Here, have an apple." "Oh no, don't give me an apple. It's all sugar," right? Have you heard people say that? Did you know that that's the best thing for them? I challenge anyone with diabetes. I will put you on a pure apple fast. Only water and 3 apples 3 times a day. I promise you, within 3 days, you will be able to reduce your medication. In fact, most people can get off of it completely. Yes, it's true. I would challenge any physician, any endocrinologist, because when you eat the apple, it's not bad for the diabetic because of what? The fiber. It's slow absorption, slow down. But the apple is going to cure their diabetes like none other. But that's a different lecture. We'll do the diabetes lecture next time. If you look at colon cancer risk, if we just raised the average fiber consumption by 12 grams a day, now that's just a bran muffin. That's not a lot, right? We could reduce colon cancer by a massive amount. And some people say, well, 1 bran muffin, does that really make a difference? Well, I don't know if you ever heard the song. It was way old, but it said, "I'd like to buy the world a Coke." Have you heard that song? You know, I'd like to buy the world a bran muffin and give them all a bran muffin, because if I did that, I would eliminate almost half of the deaths of colon cancer just from people eating a bran muffin every day. That's it. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Lifestyle does make a difference. When I worked at Stanford, I remember I had a pediatric intern. She was her first year, fresh out of medical school, in her 20s. And she was so nice. She was very good, of course, with the kids, but she was good with the adults. She was willing to do anything. And I remember she did a fantastic job, her first rotation in the ER, and I gave her, highest marks. And I said, "Hey, when is this girl coming back?" Because she was here like 6 months ago, and typically they come back in the fall again to rotate in the ER. And they, "Oh, you didn't hear?" I said, "Hear what?" "Oh, she was diagnosed with breast cancer and was dead in 6 months." And I was devastated. My mouth kind of hung open. I said, "There's no way." They said, "There is a way." Yes, she was dead within 6 months. She's gone. She's not coming back ever. And we were so shaken up as the resident class, we all banded together and we did like the Race for the Cure, and we raised $50,000 in her name. But let me tell you, this girl was not a isolated situation, because if you look at this room, how many women are here? Maybe about 45, 50? Let's say there's 50. Did you know that out of that 50, 7 of you will be diagnosed with breast cancer? It's 1 out of 7. And cancer of the breast is not just a deadly cancer, but it hurts someone's identity, right? You tell a woman you've got to have double mastectomy. She's not going to look forward to that, right? Because that takes away a part of what she identifies as femininity, right? It's absolutely a devastating disease. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the types of breast cancer. I'm just going to talk about estrogen sensitive. There's the estrogen insensitive, estrogen sensitive sort of cancers. Now, most people think about estrogen in terms of negative, right? They think about, oh, we get all these estrogens and we're exposed to it in the foods and the cattle, and that's a different lecture. But did you know all estrogens are not negative? Did you know that some hormones are positive? Do you know that 1 Timothy 2:15 says that women will be saved in childbearing? Now, I used to think that was like the most chauvinist verse in the Bible. Did you know that? But did you know it's not? It's just the truth. Did you know that a woman who has had at least 1 child versus a woman with no children reduces her risk of breast cancer, uterine cancer, and ovarian cancer just by having 1 child? Do you think God's word is true? Absolutely true. Not just spiritually, but literally, physically. But most of the hype is people talk about, well, I get exposed in the foods and the antibiotics and hormones and the animal foods and whatever. Yes, we can talk about that, but on a different note, I want to tell you where the real risk is from estrogen. Most people don't know this, but your exposure to estrogen is actually mostly from your own body. And I'll tell you that all of you actually understand this. How many of you have ever seen like an ultra marathoner before? They do like 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers. Now, here's my question. What does an ultra marathoner, female, and an ultra supermodel have in common? Both of them don't have something. Their period. That's correct. Now, the reason why they don't have their period is why? Why do you suppose? Why do you suppose? You already said it. That's right. They don't have enough fat, right? When you drop a woman's body fat to below 12%, most women will lose their period. Did you know that? Now, the reason why most people don't know, it's because in the fat cell, you have a very interesting process. You take the estrogen and you convert it to the active form of estrogen. So when you don't have enough fat cells, you cannot produce enough active estrogen to actually create a period. And that's very unhealthful. Did you know that? If you skip your period, don't say, yay, praise the Lord, no period. That's not good for you. In fact, you are setting yourself up for osteoporosis down the line. It's very serious. So don't ignore it if you don't have periods. See your doctor right away. But anyway, I want you to understand that we understand that women with low body fat lose their period. But we forget that too much fat is also out of balance. They get overexposed to the active form of estrogen. And in fact, when you're overexposed to the active form of estrogen, it creates a risk factor. In fact, I'm going to tell you in terms of premenopausal and postmenopausal. When you look at this, let's suppose that this is normal weight woman, this is overweight woman, and this is an obese woman. Now, what does that mean? Normal weight is normal weight. Overweight is greater than 10% of your ideal body weight, and obese is greater than 20% of your ideal body weight. Now, when you look at risk for breast cancer, let's say this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, when you look at the risk for breast cancer, a normal weight woman has, let's say, 1 baseline risk. An overweight woman has 2 times or double the risk, and an obese woman has 3 times the risk. Now, this is for pre-menopausal women. So in other words, before menopause. Before menopause, fat creates a linear risk relationship to breast cancer and your body weight. Now, if you look at postmenopausal women, the curve actually changes a little bit. A postmenopausal woman whose normal weight, still 1 time the risk. Overweight goes to 5 times the risk. And obese, 12 times the risk. It's not a linear relationship. This is called an exponential relationship. Now, does anyone remember what was the increased risk factor for smoking and lung cancer? It was what? 7 times. This is 12 times. And I'm going to make an appeal. Most of you are Seventh-day Adventists, so you don't smoke. And you say, oh, I don't smoke, la, 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 la. But did you know that if you are 60 pounds overweight, it's like you're smoking a pack a day? So don't think for a minute that, you can pat yourself on the back and I don't smoke. Yeah, but if you're 60 pounds overweight, you're doing the same damage to your health as if you smoked a pack a day and were normal weight. Does that make sense? So don't ignore obesity because it's a huge risk factor, especially for breast cancer in postmenopausal women. Now I want to go beyond the science of breast cancer in terms of epidemiology. And I want to focus in more on what exactly is cancer, the actual definition. Somebody give me a definition for cancer. Someone give me a definition for cancer. Abnormal cells, yes, but what are they doing? Yes, but not just multiplying, because look, let's say if you cut yourself, right? What do you want the cells to do? Multiply, right? You want them to multiply until they reach what? Another healthy cell. Does that make sense? Then you want them to stop, right? So cancer is a group of cells multiplying out of control. Does that make sense? It's not just multiplying cells, because you want your cells to multiply in some cases, but you want them to multiply with respect to the other cells around them. Does that make sense? You want them to come to a healthy cell and then just stop, right? No more. You want them to reach a healthy organ and not mess with the healthy organ. Does that make sense? Now, when you consider this, cancer not only grows out of control, but it actually will steal from other organs and cells around it. Does anyone know what angiogenesis factor does? Like, let's say you have a tumor. It will actually produce something called angiogenesis factor, which creates new blood cells to grow into the center of the tumor, and it starves the other cells around it of circulation. Did you know that? The cancer will actually grow, and it will crush other organs. It will destroy healthy cells out of the way in the effort for it to get bigger. and more nutrition. In fact, there is an actual phenomena with lung tumors called superior vena cava syndrome. And what happens is, this is your trachea, your main stem bronchus, and this is your heart. Your heart's actually not really heart-shaped, not quite, but this is the superior vena cava, this is the inferior vena cava. Now, when you have a lung tumor, when it's small, it's not really a big deal, but as it gets bigger and bigger, it can actually start to compress the superior vena cava. Now, this is important because this brings blood return to the heart. It's not just an optional sort of blood vessel. So as it begins to expand and expand, it compromises the blood flow through the superior vena cava. And what do you suppose happens when the tumor grows so big that it completely blocks off the blood return to the heart? What do you suppose happens? You die, yes. But what do you think happens to the tumor when you die? No, it dies also. Did you know that? Are you seeing something? Well, if you're not, I'm going to tell you how the immune system works. Does anyone know what the single unit of the immune system is? We talked about it yesterday already. It's the white, what? White blood cell, yes. When you have a white blood cell, did you know a white blood cell is only a single-celled organism? Did you know that? It's a single-celled organism. It's very, very peculiar. The white blood cell defies all evolutionary theory because most single-celled organisms, when they come to something that is toxic, okay? Let's say they come to something that's toxic. Do you know what the single-celled organism will do? It will run away. It will avoid that toxic whatever exposure. But the immune system is different. When it sees bacteria or viruses or cancer cells or parasites or whatever, do you know what the white blood cell does? It actually, well, it doesn't eat them, but it's kind of like that. It's called phagocytosis. What it does is it will actually engulf them. It will actually engulf them and take them inside of its cytoplasm. And once it's inside, it does not eat them, but it actually binds them to something called vacuoles. They will bind to the cell wall of the invader, and they will release their contents, creating poison. Did you know that? It's superoxide perioxidase, superoxide dismutase. There's all kinds of, you don't need to know what it is, but basically the bottom line is that the white blood cell is able to kill the invader, but it hurts. It is a painful process. In fact, the process is so painful that the white blood cell can only do it about a dozen times before its cytoplasm becomes so toxic that itself will die. So can you imagine? Maybe it's like 10, 11, maybe the white blood cell retreats to the spleen or the lymph nodes or the bone marrow. Do you suppose that happens? Did you know that every single white blood cell of the immune system will fight to the death? Every time. Even though it hurts. And even though it dies. But when the white blood cell dies on behalf of the body, within about 3 days, it is reborn in the bone marrow. to live, to fight again. Are you seeing something yet? If you don't get it, I'll show you one thing and you will not miss it. There are certain enemies that are too powerful for the white blood cells to defeat immediately. And when they sense that, like for example, tuberculosis is one of those infections. When the white blood cells sense that they cannot defeat the enemy immediately, they do something different. Instead of engulfing the enemy, they begin to surround it. They line up shoulder to shoulder. And they make their way around the infection. And once they complete their circuit, they completely surround the enemy and create a living wall between you and death. And once they have done that, they will allow their cell walls to keratinize and they will all die. But they will create a shield between you and the enemy. Are you seeing something yet? Are you seeing something that I saw when I studied immunology? You see, cancer is the most selfish organism on the planet. It consumes for itself. It destroys things around it. It takes circulation. It doesn't care about the other healthy cells. But even though cancer only cares for itself, when it finally kills you, it dies anyway. But the immune system is completely self-sacrificing. Its whole life cycle is based on giving, is based on taking the pain and the poison on behalf of the body. But even though the immune system dies every day over and over again, it is reborn again. You see, the immune system is unselfish. It is self-sacrificing. But amazingly enough, it does not end in death like cancer. It is reborn again. You see, cancer and the immune system represent the two great philosophies struggling for the supremacy of Earth. It is selfishness or unselfish love. Did you know that the opposite of love is not hate, but selfishness? If you think about what you do every day, I challenge you. 95% of things that you do are for yourself, for your job, or for your family and friends. I challenge you. 95% of what you do is 100% selfish. You know how you can tell who you live for? It's two books, your checkbook and your date book. How do you spend your time and how do you spend your money? And you will find that we're selfish. But let me tell you, you're not alone. This world has bought into that philosophy. They say nobody can take care of you better than you can take care of yourself. You got to look out for number one. Did you know there's a magazine called Self? That's how bad our society is. But my question to you is, will you be cancer? Will you live for yourself? Will you gather for yourself? Will you spend time for yourself? If you do that, you will die alone. Or will you live like the immune system? Will you live like the only thing that can defeat cancer? Will you live like the white blood cell? Will you live on behalf of others, even though it hurts? I want to tell you that I have chosen the path of the immune system. You know, it hurts to go 15 time zones twice a month. I won't lie. It's inconvenient. But you know what? It's the greatest thing I could ever do. Because as I am giving on behalf of the body, it is changing me. In fact, I'm going to tell you, it not only may hurt to be self-sacrificing, you may even die giving to others. But if you die, I promise you, you will be reborn like the immune system. You will rise again like the immune system. My question to you is simple. Which will you be? Will you be cancer? Because if you will be, you will die like cancer. You will die alone. Or will you be the immune system? Will you live on behalf of others, even though it hurts? I promise you, if you do that, you will be happier in this life, and you will be welcomed to eternal life as well. Does anyone remember our Bible verses from the last presentation? We talked about the favorite Bible verse, which is John 3:16. We talked about the commentary, which is 1 John 3:16. But did you know what John 15:13 says? It says, greater love has no man than this, than he what? Lay down his life for his friends. But I would challenge you on that. Because Jesus laid down his life for us, not when we were his friends, but when we were, what? Enemies. Jesus is the great immune system. Only Jesus can defeat the cancer of sin. But my question to you is, which will you be?
Okay, no one. Oh, okay.
Immune system is something, but I heard also about, like what you said, white blood cell is reborn. How about stem cells?
Stem cells, maybe I should move back up here. Stem cells are actually a very cutting edge piece of research right now. And what they're trying to do is, does everyone know what stem cells are? Stem cells are undifferentiated cells. They're the precursor cells, but they haven't decided what to be yet. So it's like, a high school cell. I haven't decided what major I want to take. I don't know if I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a poet, a musician, right? So a stem cell can become any cell. Does that make sense? And so what they're thinking of is that you harvest somebody's stem cells, grow them in a plate, and then inject them back in so that you can maybe reverse their arthritis or reverse cancer, or reverse heart disease, or even grow another organ sort of thing. There's all kinds of things doing with that. As far as the stem cells, there is some very promising research for some of it, but it's all preliminary right now. There's nothing really solid, but there's a few companies that are showing very, very good promise. In fact, there's a certain company, which I won't mention, but they have actually come up with a stem cell technique where they can cure color blindness. They can actually do it not necessarily with the stem cells so much, but they use a virus to carry a gene into the retina cells, and they can restore color vision to people who are colorblind. So there is some talk about that, but it's all preliminary.
What about some people are taking stem cells in the form of supplements? What do you think of that? Have you heard of it?
I have heard of it. I'm not aware of any research that shows any long-term sort of results on it yet. But certainly there are supplements that stimulate stem cell growth. There are supplements that enhance your production of stem cells. There's no questions about that. And my belief is that it certainly could be promising. But I don't know of any solid data yet. Anyone else?
Okay. Second question.
Okay.
No question.
All right. No, go ahead.
Sorry, Dr. Tim. Just now you mentioned something about health assets of being overweight and obese. How about the opposite? Is there any hazards for being underweight?
Yes, there is. There is several hazards. you can have malnutrition, you can have osteoporosis, you can have all kinds of things. But the nice thing is that the recent literature, they used to say if your BMI was less than 20, that was harmful, but they've actually changed that now. They found, yeah, they've lowered it, but also they found that if you underfeed animals, like typically they just give animals ad lib, they just put a dish of feed, they eat whatever they want, but if you actually lower their caloric intake and they get more lean, they actually live longer. So people who are more lean actually have an advantage for longevity. So they're thinking it's not so bad to be a little on the skinnier side. I will say that, you know, you don't want to be like concentration camp skinny. Like when I was really skinny, I weighed 60 kilos. Now I'm 6'1". That's skinny. And when I would pick up a suitcase, my shoulder would dislocate. That's how loose my joints were. That's obviously too skinny, right? So yeah, you can be too skinny and there are some risks. But I wouldn't be too afraid of it because the literature is starting to lean toward favoring people that are on the slender side. Other questions? Yes, Carissa.
You talk about the vitamin D, right? So does that mean when we have outdoor sports, do we put on sunblock? And what is the problem?
You know, some people, the sunblock has mixed reviews. Now obviously, you don't want to burn. So if it comes between using sunblock and burning, definitely don't burn. But some people have complained because the active ingredient in sunblock usually is some form of a heavy metal. Did you know that? And the body will actually absorb that to a greater or lesser degree. So some people say it's very negative, some people say it's not. You know, what I would say is it's better to use clothing to block the sun if you need that rather than the sunblock. But if you have to use, like let's say, you know, you're scuba diving or something like that. Like I went scuba diving on Guam, I can't really put clothes on in the water, you know what I mean? So that would be a time where I probably would use sunblock because you're right near the equator and you're snorkeling, so your back is constantly exposed to the sun. So it's better to use the sunblock than to burn because the burn creates a huge risk for skin cancer down the line. Any other questions? Yes.
GMO food.
GMO foods are bad for you. But that's another lecture. I mean, I can give you a longer answer than that, but basically, when you genetically modify something, what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase crop yields, increase protein content, increase hardiness versus insects versus disease and things like that. But the problem is when you mess with stuff like that, it's not always positive. I mean, certainly, I think that there is an argument for selective breeding of plants or grafting. You can graft plants in. Like, do any of you like avocados? Who likes avocados? Do you know that the Hass avocado is not an original avocado? Did you know it's actually a hybrid? Did you know that? So there's not necessarily all evil in that sort of thing, but when you genetically modify something, I believe, this is my personal opinion, that you're going to start to see that a lot of these GI problems like irritable bowel and all this other stuff that people are getting, I think it's really going to be due to the GMO because your immune system, I think, is starting to respond to that sort of stuff and attack it. And then so you sensitize your immune system against you, and the big problem foods are soy, wheat, and corn. Those are super modified generally. It's very hard to find organic soy.
A follow-up question.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Is compared to GMO plant food and commercial meat, which one is more harmful?
Oh, no question, meat. I mean, I have patients of mine, and they say, "Doc, I smoke, but I smoke organic tobacco. And I roll my own." And I'm like, please. You know, it's like, it's very, very bad for you.
A lot of people are avoiding GMO food, but they are still eating a lot of meat.
Yeah.
So they are majoring in minor.
I would say that if you were going to choose between the two, I would rather see you eat GMO vegan than eat meat. Even if you're like saying, well, I do free range or I do, you know, whatever. It's just, meat is like, there's so much literature against meat. Like the China diet study is talking about cancer. When T. Colin Campbell looked at just animal protein, all of the graphs and all of the studies show there's a direct linear relationship between animal protein and all forms of cancer. All forms of cancer. So don't eat animal protein. It's not good for you. You know, it's just, it certainly is time to get rid of it, especially because of the disease in the animal population. And if you're still eating meat, you're just really, you're taking a risk every time, you know. So I would recommend that unless there's nothing else available, unless that meat is like the best thing available, that you choose the veggie option when you can. You know, plant foods are definitely going to be better for you, not just from cancer, but every other way. Yes?
You mentioned earlier on regarding the vitamin D and taking a shower. Yeah, I have a hard time trying to understand that. Because we take a shower like twice a day.
Yeah, that's fine, but don't use soap on the sun-exposed parts. That's what I meant.
Can shower but don't use soap.
Well, don't use, like let's say, like right, the way you're dressed right now, you're exposed in your legs and your arms. So when you soap on the shower, you could soap up your armpits, your groin, but don't go here. Don't go here. At least for 2 days. But just those areas. I'm not saying don't take a shower for 2 days.
For me, when I take a shower, you know, soap everywhere except my face.
Well, that's up to you, but I wouldn't do that. That's what I'm saying. It's up to you, but I'm just telling you, if you soap an area up, it is going to dissolve the vitamin D into that little soapy mass.
Can we have vitamin D supplement?
Yes, you can. Absolutely, you can. There is nothing wrong with vitamin D supplements. I am for supplements, but I ask that you do it intelligently. Some people I know are taking like 50,000 units 3 times a week. They're crazy. Exactly, they're crazy. I say, listen, have you had your vitamin D level checked? No, but I'm sure I'm low. And I'm like, you don't know. You don't know that. So I would say if you're going to take mega doses, you better be checking your vitamin D level with your physician. And because as Pastor said, it's fat soluble, so it can accumulate to toxic levels. So I think that you need to do it intelligently. And yes?
Our cameraman has something to ask.
I read somewhere 5-6 years ago, one Indian doctor from Canada will recommend very high dosage of vitamin D3.
Yeah.
D3 will stimulate absorption of calcium.
Yes,
right?
it's true, yeah.
And then if any vitamin D, a large amount, right, will be converted.
It can be accumulated. I mean, even if it's D3, you can still get too much of it. I mean, there's a few vitamins that actually are fat soluble that you cannot overdose, but it's a different form of the molecule. Like we talked about fat soluble vitamins, right? Everyone remember A, D, E, and K? But vitamin A acetate you can overdose on. But does anyone know what the form of vitamin A is in the plant kingdom? It's beta carotene. Who knew that? Very good. It's beta carotene. And with beta carotene, if you take mega doses of beta carotene, you're just going to turn orange. It's not really going to hurt you. You're just going to look really weird. So that's about it. So if you have different forms of the vitamin, you can protect yourself somewhat. But as far as I know, vitamin D3, you still can get too much of it. Yes?
I have 2 questions. One is, I heard one of the doctors said, as long as you are exposed to a small part of your body to the sun, is sufficient.
Yeah, but I challenge that, because how much is a small part? Yeah, face and arms, but how long? And is it cloudy or is it, yeah.
How long is the exposure? And another thing is, what about indirect sunlight, reflected sunlight, and artificial lights?
Yes, yeah, if you have terrain like water or sand or grass, that's going to affect the amount of reflected sunlight that you get. But like I said, you can look up an equation, and the site on the Norwegian whatever site, it'll plug all those things in, so you can actually figure out how much vitamin D your body is producing if your face and your arms are exposed only. But the thing is that most people avoid the sun. That's the danger. Most people stay indoors. Like even right now, we've got great sunlight here, but no one wants to go outside because like they've got the umbrella thing going on, you know, or it's too hot or whatever, you know what I mean? It's not good for you to do that. So yeah, I would say if you're going to say a little bit of exposure, make sure that that little bit of exposure is between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. because that's when you get the maximum amount of vitamin D. Yes?
Wait. There's a follow-up question about cancer.
Oh, okay, sure.
What is the best treatment for cancer?
The best treatment for cancer is avoiding the cause. That's what I would say.
To prevent cancer.
Prevent cancer, yes, exactly.
Theory that eggs, all eggs has cancer cells in them.
All eggs?
That's true, I heard from that.
Oh, artificial lighting. I'm sorry, I didn't answer that question. In response to your question, like artificial lighting, like tanning beds? Are you talking about like tanning beds? This does not give you vitamin D. It's different spectrum. Yeah, there's visible light, there's ultraviolet light, and there's infrared light.
She also mentioned reflected light.
Yeah, reflected, yeah. If you're outside and you're on the beach, the sand actually enhances the vitamin D. Or if you're on the water, it's going to reflect. Snow also
what
reflects.
What about standing near the window?
You know, that's a very good question, Pastor. Most windows actually block the ultraviolet B, so you probably don't get vitamin D. The problem is, though, they don't block the ultraviolet A, and the ultraviolet A actually destroys the vitamin D in your skin. It's kind of a funny thing, and the ultraviolet C is just not good for you at all. So there's different spectrums of the ultraviolet. But as far as most glass blocks the vitamin D producing spectrum of the ultraviolet.
Okay, last 3 questions. Eggs, haven't answered yet. Eggs got cancer.
So here's the problem with eggs. It's not the eggs necessarily, but most breeds of chickens will eventually get some form of cancer. That's the key. And the reason why I don't recommend eggs in general is for that reason. There's just too much disease in the animal kingdom. And yes, you could say, well, I get organic and I get free range and stuff like that. But even that, did you know that free range is just a square yard? No, I'm serious. That's the definition of free range. And so unless you have like your own chickens, it's not really free range. You know what I'm saying? And it's not really organic because it's like how many chickens really are free to roam around. So it's in general, I don't recommend eggs, but it's not because of the cholesterol. A lot of people say all that stuff. It's really the disease issue. If you had healthy, completely healthy chicken lines, it probably wouldn't be that bad. But I think in this time of Earth's history, it's just too big of a risk.
Okay, second last question.
Doctor, what would you advise about multivitamin? Because I heard many years ago, a doctor told me that the food that you take will not be able to give you the vitamin, the complete vitamin.
That is true in some cases because many of the micronutrients in foods are things that are absorbed from the soil, right? So I'll give you an example. Something like iodine, unless you have soil that's near the sea, you probably won't get iodine from your diet. That's why they iodize most salt, right? The other thing are things like micronutrients like selenium. Selenium is very dependent on the soil where you grow it. So there's certain things where that is actually true. And I'm not saying multivitamins are evil, but if you want to supplement your nutrition, what I would recommend is that you juice instead of using multivitamins. And of course, when you get a multivitamin, don't get the ones with iron because that's bad for you. That shortens your longevity.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Yeah, doctor, I used to have constipation problem. And then it's not that I don't eat enough vegetable. I do eat a lot of vegetables and fruit, and yet I still constipated. I don't know whether it's not enough oil or what. But then when I take the prunes
Yes.
and the psyllium husk,
Yes, good.
sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work.
Well, see,
And I realized that I need to double up my exercise, then I can.
does that help when you do your exercise? When you do your exercise, does it help?
I come here for the camp, right? So many days we've been eating the vegetable food, right? I still constipate. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I think you raise a good point because constipation is not just about what you eat. It's about how much water you drink, how much exercise you do, even stress, even in your mind. You know, I've known patients that are constipated only because of this. And they're usually pediatric patients because they'll hold it in, even reflexively without even knowing it. So I would say that constipation has a lot of causes, but if you have this, even though you're using prune juice, even though you're exercising, even though you're drinking enough water, you should probably be evaluated. Because if this is something that is recent especially, and is not typical for you, you should be checked for colon cancer. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? No?
Okay. Any question? Ask personally.
Yeah.
Okay, and now it's free time. Please enjoy yourself until dinner time. And then after dinner, it's free and easy. It means you don't have to pay and it's not difficult.
Yes.
All right?
Before we go, can I ask you, Pastor, to close us with prayer?
Shall we all stand for prayer? Dear God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessing of this lecture. We want to be blessed by the humility to practice what we have learned. For the best prevention, for the best treatment of diseases is the prevention. So help us to put into practice the health principles, to exercise, to eat healthily,
Amen.
to trust in divine power.
Yes, Lord.
I pray for each one, dear Father. You love every one of them.
That's right.
You know who has the potential for cancer. You know who are living healthily. I pray for all of us that we will be disease-free and live until when you tell us to rest in Jesus. Or live until when Jesus comes to bring us home. Bless Dr. Tim and the rest of us that we may continue to eat healthily and be a shining light to the world that is sick. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.